Hello, everybody. Tommy here, World at War Comics, and thank you for joining. We have two amazing guests. We have Josiah Golojuh, who is the new director of the Zen documentary, which you can find on YouTube. Everything is below. And then we have the co-creator of Zen, Intergalactic Ninja, and that is Mr. Steve Stern. Both of them have been on before. We brought them back together with the new documentary that Josiah did on Zen, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, before we jump into that, please head over to zoop.gg. Just type in zoop.gg and then go to Kingsville. Our current campaign is on Zoop right now for issue number 3. Please go over there and check it out. One of these covers could be yours. A lot to choose from, a lot of rewards, and we could use your support. All right, without further ado, here is Steve and Josiah. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I have two amazing guests. Both have been on the show individually. We have brought them all together for one amazing reason, which we're going to get into. But before that, I would like to welcome Mr. Josiah Golojuh. Josiah, good to have you back again, my friend. Comic book creator, writer, and documentary director, producer, I guess now.
I know. How did that happen? That's
How did that happen?
It's just you sometimes you meet people that are awesome and you
Yeah.
want to share how awesome they are and you back into things. And I've always been making things and creating things, and I have a background in production, but it just became somehow a documentary.
Josiah, but Josiah, who did you meet that was so? Who did you meet that was so awesome, Josiah?
I don't know. I think it was. I don't know how I got introduced first. That's another question, but.
Well, I think you're talking about Mr. Steve Stern, who is the co-creator and writer of Zen Intergalactic Ninja. Steve, second time back on the podcast. Thank you so much. I got Josiah, your young zombie here. I got the Lamore edition, which was not your last Kickstarter, but the first one right before that. But man, I cannot wait to get into it. Josiah, when I talked to you last, you had talked about you were working on a Zen documentary, and it is done. I had the pleasure of watching it. Incredible. If you're a fan of Zen, you're going to learn something because there's all kinds of stuff that I wasn't even aware of. And I love how you keep going back to, man, I wish they just numbered like 1 to 300 and the back and forth to try and figure out. But man, has a lot been written over the years. So, man, I would love to just kind of jump into that. Maybe we could start with you, Steve. We were just talking a second ago. 37 years of Zen. I feel like this documentary has been something that has been in waiting for a long time, and now it's finally here, man. But 37 years of a title that you've worked on is absolutely impressive. Doesn't happen in comics very often.
Well, it's been an amazing ride that continues. And I have to tell you that Josiah's dedication to an interest in Zen resulted in this amazing 90-minute documentary that, as of a few minutes ago, nearly 1,000 people have viewed. So congrats on that to you, Josiah. And Josiah, it was just amazing. I mean, he was able to listen to me wax prolific on Zen for like hours and then edit it into something that allowed a lot of other people to also be interviewed. But it was an amazing experience. It's a great documentary. So many people have written to me saying, wow, who produced this? This is like, this could be on, streaming media. So Josiah, congrats. And I'll throw it back to you, sir.
Yeah.
So it started with, Steve was kind of making the rounds and reaching out to people. And I have my own YouTube channel. Josiah is Right, WRITE writer. And I've been on here to promote, Young Zombie and that before with Tommy. And what happened was Steve reached out, and when he reached out, I was like, wait, the guy who created Zen? Because I was a Zen fan as a kid. I found Zen. I shared that in the documentary. I shared that with Steve before. And so I was taken aback that he was, promoting the next thing, which was at the time the Lamore Supreme Kickstarter, as you mentioned. And there's a little bit about that in the documentary. And at the time when we talked, Steve and I did a Zoom interview, which is what we're doing here. When you're all over the place, and I utilize those in the documentary for people like Bill Mouse, who is across the country, right? Don Chin, who is in California, but Northern California. Steve is in Southern California. I'm in Huntington Beach. He's in LA, so we're a more achievable drive, right? So with that, it was once we did that interview, and it was a great interview, but I thought, man, there was after that, I was like, oh, there's questions I wish I would have asked. And I could, I was thinking about that. And so I was like, I talked to him and we started talking a lot more. And I would say, hey, Steve, what about this? And I would say we became friends, right? And I thought I could make more out of this. I didn't think at that point that it would be a documentary.
Wow.
I thought it would just be an interview in my, studio garage here. I'm in my garage. It looks, from this view, it looks kind of maybe like a fun game room or something, but that garage door is on that side. As Steve knows, where he stared at it behind me for, 2 hours or whatever it was. And I thought I can do better than that and make something just a more interesting interview, not thinking documentary. But once I interviewed him here in that setting, then I was like, oh, okay, I got to do more than this. I can't just post this as an interview because there was so much more. And then he started talking about, oh, what about Bill? What about Don Chin and these other people that could talk to? And then some fans that, of Zen like myself. And then even reflecting on the process as I was editing it, thinking of more things. And then as I traveled last summer, I filmed segments when I traveled home to visit my family in certain places where I found my first Zen comic, which is not the same store anymore. It's now a Walmart. You'll see in the documentary, but I was in the same location with my kids filling in for me, my daughters. So I was able to do more than I originally intended. That's why I said, I kind of fell into the documentary because as I was editing what I thought would be just like maybe a 30-minute to 45-minute interview or something like that became much more, first because Steve provided so much more good content, but also that there's a bigger story there because there's so much more to Zen. And I think one of the things that I think people that can take away from this, you don't even have to care about Zen or know Zen. You could watch this documentary, and if you just care about the creative process or learning about the history of making something and sustaining it, that's what this is. That's what it is. And even like the other side of loving something, which is what I tried to reflect of a character that you follow your life. And I likened it in there to an indie rock band from Pittsburgh that I've loved. And I think that's what it is. And I think that Zen will and can continue to grow. And Zen, with these last Kickstarters, like seeing the L'Amour Supreme as you showed, and if you get that in your hands, if anybody can find them now with that printing, it looks so cool. Like incredible. I have Steve gifted me when he visited for that interview one of the original prints, but seeing that like in this sort of like almost like the prestige format, it's so cool to see it like that. So the things that what the legacy of the comic and the character, but just the deeper story of the creation. Like you don't have to necessarily care about Zen. And that's something I kind of learned watching. I wouldn't say this is the show that inspired me to make the Zen documentary, but The Toys That Made Us on Netflix, because it's the story behind those things. Like I didn't think I would care about the Barbie episode, but that episode was great. Yeah. The My Little Pony episode, those episodes were great, just as great as the He-Man. Like the He-Man's probably still the best, right? That's the reason they, went there. But like those episodes are really just as good, even though I don't necessarily care about the toys, even though now that I have daughters, you can't see it. But to my left, there is a giant Barbie dream house right here. It's so big that it was originally supposed to be a daughter's room. It doesn't fit in there. That's how big the Barbie dream house is. But I think that's what this documentary speaks to beyond just Zen. But if you are a Zen fan, it's definitely going to have so many amazing nuggets that, some things that have probably never been said other than in that documentary that I was, the coolest thing ever was as a Zen fan, I was like the first person to hear them. So that was pretty amazing too. So
incredible. Yeah, no, I think you learn a lot throughout the entire documentary. But starting from the very beginning, I don't think a lot of people understand how fast it kind of exploded. And there were so many things that you mentioned, Josiah and Steve, throughout the documentary, especially at the beginning, that were kind of worked at the right time, whether it was Ninja Turtles and some of this other thing. Like, it was like the perfect time for Zen to explode. And all of a sudden, right, you say 37 years later, how does a character like Zen have such staying power? Well, if you look at Ninja Turtles today, it really happened during the late 80s, right? When those big booms. And Josiah, I think you mentioned, I agree, some of the best IPs and toys that I still to this day that were ever created happened in the 80s, I think, with GI Joe, Transformers, Ninja Turtles, Zen. Like, man, so many things were working. And Steve, and I felt like you were right at the precipice of all of that movement that was taking place, whether it was toys and or comic books. And boy, did Zen pay off from that.
Well, it's just been, like I said, an amazing ride, because uh, Zen, like many, many things in my life, wasn't planned. It happened. You know that expression, timing is everything. But once it started happening, I did, utilize my advertising, marketing, and public relations tools, and whatever creativity the good Lord blessed me with, right, to maintain and grow the property, because the comics business is a business, right? And in addition to the creativity that you have to infuse your property with, you got to know how to sell it, so to speak, right? And all of that is that whole journey, that whole odyssey that continues up over now 37 years, is explained in depth in this amazing documentary of Josiah's, because not only does he interview me, but he interviews Dan Cote, my Zen co-creator, and Dan tells a very interesting story. And he also interviews Bill Mouth, who's done tremendous amount of work on Zen, and up till right now with our new Bounty Wars Kickstarter, and Don Chin, who was my Zen co-publisher for a good few years under the Entity label. So all of this stuff is the meat and potatoes of the documentary, and anybody who just wants to see how something like this can occur, it's all in there. I think that's why up to over nearly 1,000 people have watched it, and I'm sure after this a lot more people are going to watch it too.
100%. I feel like a lot of people are going to jump on this documentary over the next year. This thing should have 30,000 views. I thought it was that good. I will say, Josiah, as a fan of Zen, as you were digging more and more into the history of Zen, you're talking to other fans like Tim, who is a mutual of ours, who it is a character in himself, man.
Yes, very much so.
Oh,
Tim is very unique.
He is the most unique person I think I've ever met in my life. The diversity of what he represents in society, from comedian to all over the place, man. I love him. I could talk to him for hours. He's just the most unique guy.
I love Tim. I would say Tim is like someone I love, but is different from me as you can get in some ways, and as similar to me as you can get in some ways. Yes,
100%. I think every person that meets him could say the exact same thing, just to be honest.
And we should mention,
and I have a great appreciation for him, and a great,
but you've just been calling him Tim. It's Tim Chismar.
Yes,
Chismar. Yes.
Who I will also call, like Josiah, a Zen super fan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And Tim's very, very interesting guy who has written and produced films. And also, it's no secret, he's like a dedicated nudist.
Yes.
Right.
Not in the documentary. Just make that part clear.
Yeah. He's clothed in the documentary, so please.
My kids also
totally
appear in it,
clothed
so it's PG in this version.
Exactly. But I love the guy. I mean, I could talk to him forever. He's just such a great guy. But what I was asking Josiah is, as you were going through this, was there what was the one or two things that maybe Steve and Dan kind of talked about that you were surprised of that you didn't already know? Was there one? I'm sure there's a lot, but was there one that we were like, oh wow, that's interesting?
I guess like the early processes, especially because like learning from Dan, the creative process of how he actually made the comics was really interesting. The airbrushing and how long it actually took, and the way he would talk about. There's a part where he talks about finding stuff. He took talks about using a radiator part as a
Yeah.
stencil, and how he would just very like I guess I'm from Western Pennsylvania, which you can see in the documentary, and I guess maybe it's one of these things that I subliminally connected with. And there's a part where Dan talks about the landscape inspiring the landscapes of the early Zen stuff and the alien worlds. And I had a lot of that when I would go play in the woods. And he talks about this, and I probably shared in when I interviewed him. I can't recall, but he talks about how he would go and run and play. And it would be that Maine would become this alien landscape for him, and that feeling is in there in that artwork, especially in the first issue of Zen.
Yeah.
And I didn't really appreciate it, I think, until making the documentary, editing all those parts over and over, and looking at the images as I'm editing them, and looking very closely at his artwork and thinking about what he's saying. Because as I kind of say in the documentary, you look at it and it's very raw. It's very, he even, he says you could say amateur, inexperienced, all those things, because it certainly kind of didn't know what he was doing at that point in terms of making comics. And if you look at the Zenith Orb, which is his most recent Zen work, and how it's kind of evolved into like sort of a modern Zen with his airbrush technique, but with like some Adobe Photoshop in
Yeah.
it, like, and it's like this modern version of his Zen. It's kind of a cool to see that evolution of Zen on his take. Because I love that there's like the version, you can have this existence of these multiple versions of Zen. Steve and I'm I know multiverse has been done to death, but I think Zen's a character who'd have a fun multiverse, but
Yeah.
with his personality, I'll just say that. But point being is that seeing that rawness and the way the landscape inspired it, because that's kind of the way I felt. And Maine and Pennsylvania are not that different. They're very
Right.
similar, and very similar people and very similar personality to the people in the place. And I realized I that's part of why I think I connected with Zen that I didn't know until I'm making this documentary as an adult. That those are the things that I'm seeing. So that's one thing that stood out. I'm sure there's more that is escaping me, but that's like one that definitely jumped out, as I'm editing it. And it was a funny thing that I interviewed Steve here, gosh, excuse me, in, I think it was May
Mhm.
of, what year is it now? 2024, when this documentary came out
A
this
year
year.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like a year ago, 2023. And it took me a year and a half, almost not quite that long, to make it. And I joked that the price of the budget on this documentary was a cup of coffee from there's a coffee place mostly here in Orange County, I believe, called Seven Leaves, and I love their coffee, so I got one for Steve. And that was the budget for the documentary for the most part. Tim, he was so all the segments were filmed here. Obviously filmed myself, and I filmed the segments with Steve. I filmed the segments myself in Pennsylvania, and set up my phone in the woods. And I filmed when Steve. I mentioned this as before we started. I filmed the parts in, which is now a Walmart, used to be the Value City, where with my kids filling in for me where I found my first Zen comic. And then I'm back home at my parents, and I'm in the woods, and I'm filming a few segments for a part early on in the documentary. I think it might be the first part where you see me. And what happened was somebody texted me, and it happened to be, and like the phone kind of shakes because it was on vibrate, and it was on my little like rickety tripod in the woods on a hill. My parents live on a hill, and it happened to be the co-creator of Zen here texting me back, because I had sent him a picture of the girls with the Zen comic in the store. So it's very funny as I'm recording these segments for the documentary. Steve texts me. So just very hilarious, and it really happened. I think I posted on Instagram. So
Yeah.
but anyway, as I'm making these different bits here and there. That was, a year ago, like in, summer. So that's over a year ago. I filmed those parts. So it's all these bits and pieces. And I'm doing these different interviews with the other creators that participated. Tim filmed his segments for me, and he actually had to film his twice. The first time he shot it, there were issues with the sound or the mic or something. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but it was basically pretty much unusable footage. But the great thing was it resulted in, sometimes when you have to reshoot, the second time was great. And that's the stuff you see in there. And the second time he had a 3-camera setup. He had more cameras than me. I have I had for Steve, I had 2 cameras set up. But for myself, I just had 1 camera. So it was worked out pretty good. And so he shot those with his friend Ben as the cinematographer on those segments and doing the audio on those. So they did all that for me. So it's people just contributing their time and their effort, being with interviews. No one was paid, but Steve, I guess, with a cup of coffee, that was his payment on that. Like my kids, maybe we bought them. I mean, I think actually they did get paid because they got a toy at the Walmart. So they were the most highly paid on this documentary. They got some toys at that Walmart by my parents' house. But yeah, so it was just all these people that just contributed something that, either gave their time to me or their efforts, as Tim did and his friend Ben, and then myself, obviously. I am capable of editing a little bit, but it's not my specialty. I'm a writer. That's why Josiah is right. And so that's what I mainly do. And so the other stuff, I can do it, but it definitely takes me longer than someone who is skilled at that. And that part definitely took me a while. In particular, shuffling the things to tell the story with different people. And I think I shared this with, on a, commenting on like Facebook or something with Don Chin, where he was like, wow, great job, Josiah, and bringing it all together. And I realized, like, in retrospect, like, I wish I had planned the questions to make it easier to edit. Because after the fact, like, I could have done that knowing now how things ended up being structured, but I didn't know that going into it. So, but it turned out okay. But like if I make another documentary on another character, or a Zen sequel documentary, like I learned a lot. Like I could make it in, a year instead of a year and a half.
Incredible. And then Steve, at the very end, there's a funny part where you just look exhausted talking about Zen. You're like, I think I have said anything and everything that I could possibly talk about Zen. But now that you've been able to kind of sit back for a month or so, or whatever this wrapped up, is there anything that you're like, man, I forgot to add this? Or you exhausted everything?
I exhausted myself. And I really think I really got into every nook and cranny of the whole Zen story and the Zen mythology. Frankly, I felt I dominated too much time. I would have liked to have seen some of the other guys talk a little longer than me, but that's just because I'm not the kind of person that loves watching themselves, whereas some people do. But no, I think it's clearly the most exhaustive, fact-filled, and interesting documentary of any sort ever done on Zen Intergalactic Ninja. And again, that's why nearly 1,000 people have already watched it. And something else I'll mention is that Josiah started the Zen Intergalactic Ninja Facebook group, and the way you find it, it's Zen:*Intergalactic Ninja on Facebook, comes right up. And as of a few minutes ago, or just before we started this interview, I just was over there, and we've nearly got 800 members of that dedicated Facebook group, which I also owe a great debt of gratitude to Josiah for, because he has become like the Zen whisperer, as we might say.
The Zen master.
He's not whispering though; it's more like the Zen hollering guy, right? But it's his passion for and his interest in Zen is so evident, right? It gave me chills watching him talk about how he first encountered Zen in that very store that's now a Walmart in Pennsylvania. And it's such an amazing thing to see how someone gets so affected in a positive way by something that you create. It's probably the greatest thrill that any creator in any medium can have, is to see uh, how someone their life was somehow changed, if only in a little way, by something that you did. So again, for all these reasons, I owe many debts of gratitude to Josiah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm touched to hear that, because, and it's true. Like I appreciate and love the character, and the Facebook group. I just thought, hey, I didn't see one that there was a space like that, so I'm like, I'll just make it. I didn't, and even with the documentary, it was kind of the thing. There was like no comprehensive thing that covered it. And, like I said, I just started out with like, oh, I wanted to do an interview. And then I thought, oh, I wanted to interview somebody else because they have interesting things. And it just built on itself, and it became an hour and a half long somehow.
Yeah,
And it just sort of happened that way. And I'm glad it did, because it covered as much as I could probably possibly cover. I don't know what else I could add at this point. Maybe a few more years we'll cover some more of these comics with like
yeah,
the Bounty Wars, the most recent that was just with Kickstarter. And those are the things usually, Steve shares on his Instagram and stuff, but you can see, that's the cool thing about the Zen Facebook group. You can see some of it there. Even as I was making some of the documentary stuff, I would share some of the pictures and things there as I
yeah.
was working on things. And there's occasionally things like, maybe little bits and pieces that got cut out of the documentary. There's not much, because that's most of the content that I have got used up. Like a few of the things, like I did post the interviews I did with like Bill Mouse and Don Chin and stuff separately. So those interviews are up there and they're full regardless. So you can still watch those. So like Bill's interview is up and Don's interview is up. Because one of the things that I did kind of go back and forth on, in terms of like, oh, I wish I could include it a little more. Like, a lot of Don's background and a bit of Bill's background. Those things kind of got cut, because there's that struggle of, with the documentary, the narrative is Zen, and so the way it starts is like, it's the dilemma of me kind of folding myself in the narrative because I told it through my lens. But then it becomes like, okay, it's the story of these two men who created this character, and then the other people that then, took that character, and how the character went off and grew. So I didn't want to like stop and then, oh, let's tell Don's background now. So it just, that was the dilemma, because there was time that, and that's some of the the edits where there's like a segment where it's like Don talking about, which is great, you can watch it in, where he talks about working in his parents' restaurant, and he had a comic shop, and the comics that he made, and how he wanted to like write for Mad Magazine. Those are all great things that you can see him talk about, but it unfortunately it wasn't the Zen narrative. So those are cool things that you can at least still see, but that's the stuff that was like the struggle in making it. So that's the challenge of making something like this. But at least that stuff did get shared just on my channel, and just the straight interview with him that was released way before the documentary ever was, because I think Don was the first person I interviewed aside from Steve here. And so that was kind of the struggle with trying to tell everybody's story, but at the same time it's fundamentally Zen's story, and how
Yeah.
Zen, this character, despite the people that created it, like Zen is his own entity. Well, entity,
Yeah.
of course, Entity Comics. Zen is his own entity that transcends that. Like my daughters now, it's funny that we'll see anything that's like an alien, it's Zen. We were at this bakery. I sent the picture to Steve. There was these cookies that had like an alien head shape, and they were the frosting was blue. And of course my daughter Penny goes, Dad, look, it's Zen. Right away. So anything like that, it's Zen for my girls. It's just funny that now they
Yeah.
have that, and they'll come and they'll play with in the garage, and honestly, that's one of the toys they asked for. And I it's not that I like, you got to play with the Zen toy, don't play with Barbies. Like, Zen will interact with Barbie. That's part of
Yeah.
why, like, there's a little bit where like I had Zen in different situations, like with the toys in here in the Barbie Dream House. That's the Barbie Dream House I was referring to, that I put him in the Barbie Dream House because they'll play with like Zen having, like hanging out and fighting the bad guys to protect the
Yeah.
Barbies. That's what they do. So
That's awesome. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the story of Zen is the success was kind of made what a lot of people would consider backwards. And the reason why I say that, right, is a lot of times you come up with a story, the story becomes a comic book, the comic book maybe becomes an animated film, maybe a movie, maybe whatever, and then toys start coming, then a video game, and everything kind of worked a little bit backwards, right? The comic
Yeah.
book came out, here came the toys, here came the video game, which Steve, you and I've talked about. Try and
Mhm.
find that video game right now, and if you do, you're going to be paying $5,000-7,000 for
Yeah.
that thing, just
Yeah.
because it is highly collectible and very difficult to find. But yeah, everything kind of the success of it did not happen the way that a lot of people would consider. This is exactly like if I was going to write a book on how to be successful, this is not how you do it, right?
Right.
Yet,
Right.
Steve, maybe your
Yeah.
marketing background and your wit and your drive, I just felt like you're the type of creator that does not leave a rock unturned.
Yeah.
And if that means I got to skip these two to go to this one, that's what I'm going to do because I'm a marketer. And at the end of the day, I want to get my creation in front of as many people as possible. Would I be correct in saying it in that way?
Yeah. Well, Zen's story is very Zen, right? And I think it's very instructive in watching, as you noted in the documentary, the very circuitous path we've taken, right? And it's sort of a testament to persistence, right? Um, I would say that whenever an obstacle was placed in front of me, I did my best to figure out a way to get around it. And also, when opportunities were presented to Dan and I, we did our best to take advantage of them. And we get into, certain controversial aspects, right? Like any property, you're going to have a couple of detractors. Okay, over the years, somebody once said to me, if you have no one who dislikes you, you're doing something wrong, right? And, one of the major things that people of this ilk, and there are not too many of them, at least that I'm aware of, but that they would point out is how, for example, we jumped on the environmental bandwagon in order to achieve the video game deals with Konami and the action figure line with Just Toys. And truth to be told, and I said this, I explained all of this. This is a total transparency documentary, right? I simply explained that at the time we were presented with the idea, the opportunity that if Zen could embody the environmental space, which was very hot at the time, hot. It's a little bit of a double entendre, I guess. If we could fashion Zen into an environmental property, that we could get these deals, okay, these deals. And Dan and I took it as a creative challenge to be able to do it. And we also realized that if we were successful, it would bring Zen to a very different level. Okay, so we did do that. To this day, make no excuses. I'm very happy we did it. We did really do our best to embody the fight for the defense of Earth. In fact, we called it Defend the Earth, and so Zen had an iteration that was, as many fans know, an environmental iteration. At the time on TV, there was Captain Planet, Ted Turner's thing, and and then talking about taking advantage of situations and also reacting to situations. For example, we were supposed, and again, all this is in the documentary, we were supposed to have an animated show on like Saturday morning TV, and the deal was struck with a very well-known old line company called Ruby Spears, right? And we went so far as to advertise it in trades like the Hollywood Reporter. And then, as sometimes happens in life, something goes south. In this case, Ruby Spears closed its doors and went out of business before they ever got to working on the show. And that brought up uh, another big challenge, which was the following. There were toys going into store retailers that are no longer around, like Toys R Us and KB Toys. So the toys were already manufactured and being distributed, but it's known that without what is typically called the foundation media, say of a Saturday morning cartoon, if you don't have that, how are you going to compete and sell your toys? So again, something else I just mentioned in the documentary is that I would go to the local Toys R Us where I knew the manager. I introduced myself, and he allowed me to like stand around and watch what was happening. And it was funny that there would be like rows and rows of Ninja Turtle toys, right? And there'd be rows and rows of Batman toys. And right in between them was one small row of Zen toys, right? Now, this sounds, like this is a pretty disastrous situation. But the amazing thing that happened, and it kind of relates to what Josiah was saying about his daughters, when they see like a blue cookie or something and it's Zen or any alien. The amazing thing that happened is, without the benefit of ever seeing a cartoon Zen on their TV, kids would pull their parents over to that one row of Zen. And I have to attribute that to the just amazing design and the blueness of the character. And that's what made all those toys sell out. And try
Yeah.
to buy one of those on the internet now, right? So just like the video games, right? So Zen is more, the documentary is more than just, well, how did this comic book get created and sustain itself, but it goes in depth into all the ups and downs and challenges and obstacles and hurdles we jumped to keep this comic book going and growing.
That's awesome. And then Josiah, for you, now that you're done, which is probably a big sigh of relief. And obviously, it's been very successful. I'm looking at a live count right now. 967 people have watched this thing, me included. Absolutely incredible. Does this give you an itch to do more of stuff like this, or you're like, I did this and I never want to have to do this again?
No, it absolutely does. And like like you see on my channel, the content slowed down a lot. Like I don't I don't put out a ton of videos. Like there was a point where when I started my YouTube channel, I didn't know what I was doing. So when I started the channel, this is just sort of a slight tangent. I left my job. My wife got a new job, and we decided one of us would just be home with our daughter, my daughter Penny, who's now 7. And so I left my job at the time, and I decided to just be home with her. We wanted that. She was not quite 1. So with that, I was like, I'll start a YouTube channel because I want to do like about geek stuff and toys, whatever. And so for her, like in her world, like I've always had a YouTube channel because she's always, when she was, there's stuff you can see when she's a baby, and I just
Sure.
didn't know what I was doing, but I knew kind of like geek stuff, and I just would make stuff, and I would just throw a lot of videos out there. And I realized like there was one I did, almost a year ago now. It was about like Revenge of the Jedi, where it's kind of like an exploration of what that would have looked like. And this is kind of the similar thing, much, much more in depth, but like when I'd rather make way less content that is really something I'm passionate about, and like really explore something that is either like I'm passionate about, that maybe like Return of the Jedi, everybody is aware of that, that what that that, we've all seen Star Wars, right? Or Zen, where less people know, but I can go way in depth and talk to people who created it and those kind of things and stuff that really matters to me personally, and way less, of that content. And so that's, where I would love to do it. And hopefully it wouldn't take quite as long. But if it's, if it results in something like this, I'm perfectly happy with that. And there was one, like with this, there's also, so in the documentary, there is the L'Amour Supreme segment, but I did at the time before the Kickstarter, I did put out a L'Amour Supreme part before that, because I wanted to make sure that was out before that Kickstarter happened, to help give a little bit of, I don't have a ton of subscribers and all that. I'm still under 1,000, but to give some love to that before. So there's a version of that with kind of some of the same stuff, but focusing more on the fact that the Kickstarter is coming out, because then you can see that this version, it's like, oh, the Kickstarter happened, it was successful. So there's like the two different versions that I created, but I would love to do more. And I kind of think about that. It's like, okay, it's like, okay, what's the next thing that I could do that would be kind of on par with this? That would be a really cool thing. I would love to, make another sort of character documentary or creator study. It was a cool process, because I learned obviously more than anybody else in this probably. And especially when you're sitting and editing it and really seeing the story. And like I said, there's bits of it that I cut out that tell the story even more. It hurts it as a narrative, but it tells the story in more depth, and you really see the people. And that's what, like, I'm passionate about. I'm a writer. I have a novel coming out, and I love stories. It's fiction, but I love fiction and documentaries and movies and whatever, because whether they're real or like a documentary like this or a fictional story, because they're fundamentally about people. And I love that. I love learning stories about people that feel real. Like, ironically, mine's about a boy and a ghost, but it's it's like they feel like real people. That's what matters. So
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. Now, as we start to look forward, we know we have LA Comic Con. Is there going to be more marketing, Steve, around the documentary when we come to LA Comic Con, where maybe you have a fan base that somehow, hopefully they hear about it before then, but it would be amazing to see what you do at LA Comic Con. Is there going to be some sort of a panel or anything like that to kind of talk about this amazing 37-year trip that you've been on with Zen?
Right. Well, the big Zen event at LA Comic Con, which is coming up imminently, is that L'Amour Supreme is going to appear there.
Wow.
Along with myself and my Zen publisher, Ken F. Levin. Ken also happens to be an executive producer of The Boys on Amazon Prime. So L'Amour will be there to sign. I'll be there to sign. Ken will be there to sign. And we're going to be at we're going to split, the three of us are going to split our time between two booths. One is Cal Burke's booth, which is McFly's Comics, and the other is Kat Jerkin's booth, which is called Trojan Collectibles. Kat is the owner of DJ's Comics and Collectibles in Studio City, and McFly's Comics is in Huntington Beach.
Yeah, by me down here.
Yeah,
that's right. And so it's going to be quite an event, because L'Amour has not appeared at any comic book conventions, I think, ever. Okay, he appeared at Cat's store like 25 or so years ago, when the initial Rawhead Saga books that are collected in the L'Amour Supreme Zen book came out. So that's going to be a big event there. And there's a lot going on with Zen. There's a current Kickstarter. I mean, it's not on at this moment, but it's a 4-part Kickstarter. It's Zen Bounty Wars, which is written by myself and drawn by Bill Mouse. And the issue number 1, that Kickstarter is done, and then there'll be 2, 3, and 4. So it's going to go on for almost like the next year. Okay. So, and there are some new things that I can't talk about yet that could be happening with L'Amour Supreme. But some of that may be talked about at LA Comic Con in early October.
Well, that's pretty exciting, and I hope to be there for some of those announcements. That would be really cool. And then Josiah, how many Zen stories do you have in your back pocket that you would like to put on paper?
I've got one I've been working on since when Steve was here. We first talked about it, and I do have it all drafted now and outlined. So that's coming sooner, because that's the other thing. Yeah. So I've been working on that. Like, I've been so occupied with this. I have so my novel, The Paperboy, is coming out as we record this. It's September 17th, and so that will release the 30th and of September. So so that's coming out very soon, and you can get it on Amazon. It'll be in digital and print there. And with that, there is a Zen reference in that as well. So it references specifically the video game. So the Paperboy is set in the mid-90s, so it's full of pop culture references and things like that. So it's a young adult story, but I think the audience of, like, you and I, Tommy, it's written to a young adult audience, but like you and I are like sort of like, I wouldn't say the primary audience, but we're like the secondary audience. Like, it'll appeal to us because the references and things are like our generation, right? It's like the kids will, it's written tonally for them, but it's referentially for us. So, but the Paperboy, that's story is sort of wrapping that up has been quite a big task, and sort of, helping, working with my publisher. It's a smaller publisher, so we're, sort of figuring out like what the bootstrap marketing looks like here. They're mainly distribution is mainly online, so kind of like working on that and working on our marketing plan and things like that as we go. Like, for example, it's funny, I just happen to have this here. We're going to be doing just a little celebration at the house here and I want to do like a kids craft for my kids, because I have little kids, and this is we're going to do bookmarks that the kids can decorate. So it'll be just like the Paperboy logo, and that's like my cartoon daughters, that we actually have a giant poster in our house that's like all of us as cartoons, but to celebrate the kids. So the idea is that the kids can decorate the inside. There will be stickers and stuff like that. So we're doing things like that for the family and my friends, to celebrate like everyone. Like, you're both invited. I've invited both of you already. Not like, I'm not like inviting them on camera. They've both been invited.
I have.
Yeah, to come here to the house. Like, it's not like a flex on screen. To come to like the house and celebrate.
I forgot to invite you, but I'm gonna do it right now. You're invited.
It's like a Hollywood power player type movie. You only do it when someone's watching. But to celebrate, just like like that, writing that book took me years and years and years. Like, I was sharing with another writer she's far more successful, was just giving me some advice the other day. And I told her how I wrote the first draft, that it was when my daughter Penny was smaller and she was napping, and she called it a nap time novel, which is hilarious. But it was true. That's how I wrote the first draft, and just all the effort that went into it, and the people have supported me. So we just want to have something at the house. We're going to kind of 90s theme it a bit, since that's when it's set. And so we're going to celebrate that. But I will be at LA Comic Con at some point, juggling that's my other daughter's birthday. My daughter Primrose is her birthday. So we're going to juggle that. We're going, as I shared with Steve, we're going to go to a Disney character breakfast. So all these things. And I actually have, this is my long-winded way to say, I have a limited amount of, I printed these, I think I printed 300 of these flyers that I don't have them on here. They're in the car. Are they in the wagon? No, they're in the car. They're in the car, but they are a special limited edition Zen flyers that I had printed, that I was going to take the Comic-Con, because I wanted to have, the idea was that it has like it's kind of similar to the Zen art for the documentary, where it has like the Bill Mouse black and white like Zen from it's like the interior cover of his issue 0, I think, that I used as the image for like the title card for the video. And the idea is there's a QR code there, and there's like a link and stuff, and just like, so that people could like, I was going to hand them out at Comic-Con when I was going to go visit Steve at the first comics booth and stuff. But my daughter Penny got sick, so we couldn't go to Comic-Con, which is fine. The kids are the priority. And so, but we had Mattel, we had Hasbro exclusive, so we could have got that, but that's okay too. So we didn't go to Comic-Con, but I have those flyers. So, point being is those will be available at LA Comic Con
Great,
because they're
great,
doing no good sitting in my garage. But the
right.
idea was that the back was supposed to be like, like that Bill would sign it or sketch it or something, just something simple. Because they were like, it's just a white card. It would make a great sketch card. I didn't actually discuss it with Bill, so not that Bill
Sorry,
will do it,
Bill.
but like I thought it'd be a cool thing. Like if you ever, came across Bill or hung on to it, like just to have him sign it kind of thing. So one day I'll have him sign one for me, but it's just a really like it looks really cool. Like, I'll send Tommy a picture so that he can like, at least put it on the
Yeah.
screen for you guys.
Yeah.
But that's like the special thing that was supposed to be at Comic Con, but that will be at LA Comic Con because I can, unless my kid gets sick again, I will physically be able to get there. So that's what's up for me with the Paperboy coming out, and then the Zen story, which has been due to time opening up, other than like my teaching and my kids, like the writing time window has opened slightly more. The Zen is the next project on the horizon. So that's what's up
Great.
for me. So, and I'm looking forward to, I really am looking forward to seeing like Steve sharing in the Zen Facebook group, the stuff for the Bounty Wars,
Yeah.
seeing like, it's kind of like, the classic, the throwback to all the Bill Mouse entity stuff, but like the new take on it. Kind of, I mentioned, the Dan Cote, like the modern version of that. Now you have the same with Bill, where it has, it's like really cool to see his artwork, but with these vibrant colors added to it now, where it just like has this like life to it in a new way. So it's really fun to see where that's gone. So
Bill is
Great.
super talented, super talented artist, incredible, and storyteller. But
yes.
yeah, I,
Yeah.
I I love his version of Zen, and obviously Lamore Supreme did such a fantastic job. I mean, the whole comic looks like the cover. It's incredible as you put it up. I mean, the it
Yeah.
just is right in your face, constantly telling you, "Look how pretty I am." Every page you turn, see I'm beautiful.
Yeah.
See I'm beautiful. It's a piece of I was gonna say a piece of art, obviously, but it is a work of art and it is amazing. So incredible. It sounds like LA is going to be the ZenCon,
Yeah.
then, Steve.
Yeah. We're really looking forward to it. And anybody who is able to attend should bring any and all Zen books with art by Lamore. And he's going to be available for signing. And of course, he'll be signing both the deluxe hardcover that you've got there, and also the variant edition that is a sketch cover edition, soft cover that was done for DJ's Universal Comics. So at the one booth at Cal's booth is where he'll be signing the hardcover, and at Cat's booth is where he'll be signing the soft cover. So it's going to be a hell of an experience.
Well, I could not be happier for you, Steve. Well deserved. Um,
Thank you.
I just, I start to look back at, outside of DC and Marvel from an independent standpoint, there's not too many people that have a creation that has lasted this long. You could probably count on one or two hands, and that's about it. And so to have that kind of character that has been able to live so long and touch so many people, congratulations. And then
Thank you.
Josiah, as a fan, in that Value Plus or whatever that store was called, and you're walking away with your Zen, to think all these years later you're doing a documentary with the co-creator and you're
I know.
talking to the entire. It's just what a weird kind of cool,
Yeah.
but just
I
weird
know that
out
was
of
a
body
cool thing. Like,
experience.
I was like, I just say, yeah, and the say like the awesomeness to like then like to make the documentary, but like the honor for me to like get to be interviewed with Steve here to reflect on it. That's a big honor for me too. That really is. So that's really
Yeah.
cool that Tommy would allow us to do this, and like that's
Um,
just like a thrill for me as well. This to be like interviewed with Steve, and like to the like that's really cool. That's really cool.
yeah,
Well, very
it's
flattering to me. Uh, the documentary is an amazing piece of work, and the fact that you've dedicated this hour to us, Tommy, is just another very flattering thing. And I promise that I will keep putting news and stories out into the world as long as I'm capable of doing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people appreciate that, Steve. Gentlemen, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you hanging out with me. Congratulations again on the documentary, a piece of art. It's absolutely beautiful, Josiah. I hope you do more of this on other really cool 80s and 90s IPs that we all grew up loving. It would be fun. I'm not sure for your wife it'd be fun, but we didn't even talk about that. But yeah. But no, congratulations. All that hard work paid off. And anybody who's watching this, I'll have the link below. Make it very easy for everybody to head over to YouTube and check it out. Hopefully you could shop it around, and maybe one of the bazillion places that are doing streaming will pick it up, because I do think a lot of people are going to really appreciate the work that went into this. And if you picked up a Zen comic over the last 37 years, I think you're going to be surprised of how big this IP actually is. And congratulations to that. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun for me.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Until next time, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your week, and we will talk very soon.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.